Hello, my name is William, the avid reader, and today I'm reviewing World War Tilting the Balance, written by Harry Turtledove in 1995. So this is the second book in the World War series and World War franchise, and it's about how aliens are invading the Earth during World War II, and all of humanity have to unite against them, and this is the second chapter in this series. One thing we can notice in this book is that the progress of conquering Earth is continuing, but it's getting slower and slower. So it's about half a year's worth of content in this book. And this book is still quite large. It's almost 500 pages in small letters, so this is a different edition from the usual Turtledove. So Turtledove writes his books around characters. So it's not a plot-driven story, it's a character-driven story. And there are a lot of characters. There's like a dozen human characters, and then you've got the race lizards things. There's 4 of them. Before I continue, there will be spoilers in this review. At the head of this conquering of Earth is this fleet lord called Atvar, and he's seeing that this conquering is going slower. There is an increased dependency on ginger by lizards. They are addicted to ginger like it's cocaine. So it impairs their clear-headedness and makes them more bold and aggressive in their attacks, and they're starting to lose more and more because of this. And in the background, there's this Skorzeny who's screwing up for them. Skorzeny is this SS guy from Nazi Germany. He pulled Mussolini out of Italy. He also stole the nuclear material in Ukraine, and then he got a Land Cruiser in France. So Skorzeny here appears in the story a little bit, and Atvar is getting angry at this. So he sends Drevsab, this lizard officer, intelligence officer, to sort some things out. So first Drevsab goes and clears out barracks of ginger addicted lizards, and Drevsab is addicted to ginger himself, and he meets another lizard, Usmak, the Land Cruiser driver, and he's irritated at having this bad crew who are addicted to ginger also, but in a much worse way. Usmak and Drevsab kind of have it under control, but both meet together and discuss, and Usmak doesn't understand that Drevsab is this cunning guy who's going to clear out things, but he spares Usmak because Usmak has his addiction under control, and Drevsab for now has it also. So he's clearing out the ginger addicted lizard, sending them back to base, I expect, and he's given a mission by Atvar when he's visiting Earth, I believe, and he's in Africa. Oh, it's nice and warm here because the lizards like warm and don't like all this water, so they like Africa kind of, and Africa is pretty easy to conquer for them. He sends Drevsab on a mission to get Skorzeny killed, but more on that later, because those two end up in a showdown in the final chapter, and it's actually pretty awesome, so I'll describe that later. Among the race, we've also got Tirtz, who's a prisoner with the Japanese, and they have him tell stuff about the atom bomb and uranium and things like that, because the race already have all these things, while these Tazevite empires don't. So they're getting information from him. He tries to keep it away from them, but they start giving meat to him when he's collaborating, and they also put ginger in it. So now he becomes addicted to it, and he starts collaborating more and more with them. So Atvar, who has his conquest of the Earth slowing down, has to worry about Straha and his faction among the ship lords to make sure that there's no coup or that they strip him of his power, so he has to worry about that. But he has his loyal ship lord, second in command Kieran, next to him to help with that. So those are the characters of the race, and they don't appear as much in this book as in the previous book, I would say, actually. So humans character, there are a lot, probably a dozen or so, and we get a lot of different perspectives. We get to see how the Jews are doing in Poland. So previously they collaborated with the lizards, now they're not anymore. So even Mordecai Analewicz, who has been this Jewish resistance fighter leader, he decides, I'm not collaborating with you lizards, because he realizes lizards want to turn the whole of humanity into slaves. Now sure, slavery isn't as bad as concentration camps, but they're still pretty bad. So people start turning against the lizards, stop collaborating with them. The Kingdom of Italy, which has officially surrendered to the lizards, are collaborating with partisans. We also see this Moishi Rushi, this former medical student who was a former Jewish collaborator, but then he spoke out against them. So he had to go underground with his wife and son. First they're underground, then they moved to some apartments, including in Lodz. So they have to see the horror, how villages are kind of dead now because some Jews have been killed. There's this aura of creepiness here with the crimes of the Nazis being understood from the individual perspective in this book. We see these Jewish collaborators with the Nazis. Now they're collaborating with the lizards, so they're just trying to save their own skin. And Mashirushi tries to get an apartment because he's afraid that he's been discovered. He has to do some Jewish negotiation with another Jew. That's a pretty funny scene and a bit stereotypical. But someone tells on him and he gets caught and sent to jail by the lizards in Poland. So they decide to send the radio operator from Britain, his cousin, David Goldfarb. And Goldfarb has worked as a radar man in the beginning of the book. He has been sent to work out some technology that they have captured from some lizard plane of a radar system, and he meets Churchill. And then he is sent to Poland to rescue him. Kind of like a commando type of guy, which is kind of interesting because he's been a radar man and he's into radios, but now he's this commando has to rescue his cousin. He meets up with some Jewish resistance fighters. He meets the wife of Rusi, and Rusi, he just speaks Yiddish pretty much, but Goldfarb both speaks English and Yiddish, although with a weird tone in Yiddish, so that's interesting. You have to remember in this book there are a lot of different nationalities and characters, so they're speaking a whole variance of languages, and there are some language differences and problems from time to time, so that's an interesting detail. This really shows that Turtledove takes his time to put detail into his stories, just minor details that you can find fun as Easter eggs. Farb, with the help of some Jewish resistance and some other humans who are sick of the lizards controlling stuff, basically blow a hole in the prison where Rusi is and free him and take him back to Britain. And Rusi makes some speech condemning the lizards. And this is unacceptable to the Atvar, and he fires the local governor Zolrag in Poland. Back in Britain, some guy that Goldfarb has previously met, George Bagnall, he is sent to Eastern Europe to help with some things, send some supplies or something like that, but then he's stuck there with some other Brits and the Germans and Soviets. There are tensions between them. At the Soviet side there are a bunch of Jews, of course, Jewish partisans who are collaborating with them, and then on the other side you've got these different Nazis and Germans under Kurt Schill, and they are not happy with each other. They have a minor skirmish or two, so George Bagnall has to mediate between both of them. He's got this friend, Jerome Jones, who speaks some Russian, so he's kind of dating some Russian sniper because the Soviet army is kind of progressive and allows women in it. And George Bagnall has to mediate between these two groups because Soviets don't like to be commanded by Germans, and Germans don't like to be commanded by Soviets. So he's a referee to them, and he de-escalates some situations. So those are some tense moments. There are tense moments in this book, plenty of them. Moving on to America, you've got these different baseball guys. There are 3 of them who are their own characters. So we got Mott Daniels, this old veteran in his 50s, fighting along. He meets a nurse called Lucille and convinces his company to bring her along. He's trying to screw her, but it turns out she's a lesbian. And when he's quite near at seducing her, she gets killed by some artillery. So yeah, he's in his 50s and he didn't succeed with his plan. There are 2 other characters, his previous subordinate. So you've got Sam Yeager, this sci-fi nerd, previous ball thrower. And in the beginning of the book, he's dating Barbara Larson, then gets married to her, gets her pregnant, and he's guarding also these couple of lizards who are actually quite happy in the American hands. It's quite relaxing. yeah, those lizards have nothing to complain about compared to what they're living under the Japanese. So that's an interesting thing. Aspect of seeing how lizards are treated differently. They actually, towards the end, play baseball with the humans, I think. But anyways, they are traveling and they end up in Colorado, where Jens Larsen, who hasn't been allowed to send a message to his wife, is waiting. And there he meets his buddy Enrico Fermi, the nuclear physicist, because Jens Larsen is a nuclear physicist. And then he sees, oh, his wife Barbara is married to another man also. Now she's technically into bigamy because she thought he was dead. And Sam Yeager got her pregnant. So there's this tension between both of them. And Barbara is not sure who she's gonna pick as a husband, but she decides to become Barbara Yeager and rejects Jens Larsen, who is going into a downward spiral. You've got Leslie Groves, the American Army chief for atomic stuff, who wants progress. He's noticing that Jens Larsen isn't working as hard as usual as a nuclear physicist. Then they think they need to relocate to get some more uranium and build a new base, so they send Jens Larsen out. Jens Larsen is bitter. He comes into a small town, he meets some barmaid, he sleeps with her, and then he gets some sexual disease, gonorrhea, so it starts hurting for him, and there's no medication for it anymore. And he's starting to think, maybe I should go work for the lizards, so he may switch sides in the next book. We'll see if he does or not. It's strongly indicated at the end that he will. Over in China, the third ball player, you got Bobby Fiore. He is brought down with his girlfriend, Liu Han, who has gotten pregnant. They are brought down back to the camp in China for the lizards to analyze this pregnancy and how everything is going on. They start a business together where Bobby Fiore puts up a show with his throwing skills and ducking and things like that. He also teaches different Chinamen to throw balls. Then there are some communists who come along. He teaches one of them and they come to his house and they want him to come along and join the fight against the lizards, and because he's such a good thrower, he can throw grenades. And he has pretty much no choice, because you do not refuse when a communist asks you to do something in these authoritarian countries. Here's an interesting thing. There's some myths in this book portrayed by the characters, and I don't know if Turtledove believes them or not, but one of the myths is that communists have been resisting hard. In reality, when you look at who resisted the Japanese harder, it was the Kuomintang much harder. But anyways, he goes and kills some lizards with them. Pretty much all of them get killed. So he escapes and goes on roads in China onto Shanghai with both Japanese and communists. But the Japanese are fighters to the death, so when some lizard patrol comes along, they get themselves killed, but the communists, they just stay behind. And later move on to Shanghai with Bobby Fiore. So Bobby Fiore is separated from his girlfriend wife kind of thing, and he's working with the communists. He's going to this brothel where one of the communists owns it, and then he's set to do a raid on the local lizard government in Shanghai, and he does it, throwing some grenades and getting into a shootout with them. And here is the only human character that dies in this book, Bobby Fiore. He gets gunned down. Back in Russia, you've got Ludmila Gorbunova, the female pilot. She's shooting up some lizards, but she also has to rescue some NKVD guy who has some important information against collaborators with the lizards. But her plane pretty much land crashes and they have to walk back together, and they meet up with George Holtz. And George Holtz has shown that he is interested in her, and so does this Sholudenko, however it's called, this NKVD man. So there's this slight competition between the two of them, and they kind of want to kill each other because it's a Russian and a German. Gorbunova prevents that and shoots up some more lizards. And we get some more perspective from Molotov. So he meets up in London with the different world leaders now, and they kind of argue, but they de-escalate and come back to a usual policy. An interesting aspect of this book is through dialogue or through thoughts, the crimes of the Soviet Union and of Nazi Germany are explored, so kind of a small argument between Molotov and Ribbentrop. Then he meets up with Stalin, they talk, Stalin reveals he has a nuclear bomb. Everyone is supposed to be sharing information about the atom bomb among the humans, but Stalin doesn't do that. And in Germany, it explodes. the nuclear thing they're creating. So Heisenberg and a bunch of other German physicists are killed. Stalin reveals that he has one nuclear bomb and he wants more, and Molotov tries to find out if there is, and there isn't, and he's kind of scared of Stalin. But then they're setting a trap for the lizards, but that's also in the end of the book, so I'll bring up that later. In Germany, you had this Heinrich Jäger who first brought this nuclear material to the Nazis, so the physicists are exploring on it. Heisenberg doesn't like him, but that doesn't matter since he died in a nuclear explosion. So Heinrich Jäger is fighting in France. He meets up with Skorzeny a bunch of times. Skorzeny is doing all these exploits, and then he decides to bring Heinrich Jäger along to Croatia because there's a worry that Croatia is switching sides with the lizard, and this is a trap that Drevsab has set up against them. This is the showdown between Skorzeny and Drevsab. Drevsab is in a helicopter while Skorzeny is in a hole and killing lizards. They are fighting in this old castle, and you're wondering, will the Croatians betray the Germans or not? They may not, but they don't in the end. Drevsab is getting arrogant because he takes so much ginger. There's a sense of ambition among some of these lizards to get to the top, so he decides to land there and fight against them with their own guns because they've run out of helicopter ammo. Drevsab takes some more ginger, and he gets to personally meet Skorzeny, the last person he meets, since Skorzeny wins the fight and Drevsab is killed. And the last thing in the book that's happening is that Ludmila Gorbunova is shooting up some lizards, and then she sees a Soviet town because the Soviet Union troops have had to retreat closer and closer to Moscow, and now they're finally back at Moscow. But now it's time to, the town next to Moscow, blow it up with an atom bomb and kill the lizards. So now some humans actually have an atom bomb or two, and this is the tilt in the balance in the World War series. How would I rate World War Tilting the Balance by Harry Turtledove? I would say it's an 8 out of 10. It's a good book, but it's not a great book. It doesn't have the magical moments really of In the Balance, because In the Balance had some beautiful love scene relationship across languages, but Tilting the Balance doesn't have any such magical moments, but it still explores some interesting things. The characters are all great. There's a misconception or two from characters' perspective, so yeah, that's a con, I would say. All around, it's a good book. You should definitely read it. A lot of great characters, good exploration of different crimes, of different governments, of the tensions. There's a notice, oh, if you speak your mind in the Soviet Union, you're definitely getting killed. But if you did that in Nazi Germany, the Wehrmacht was less subordinate to the Nazi government than the Red Army was to the Soviet government. So here you see some different dynamics in these different countries. A lot of these characters meet up together, so they're all pretty much connected somehow to each other with a few exceptions. And all around, it's a good book, so 8 out of 10. Harry Turtledove, you keep writing good books, I'm impressed. So, this was the Avid Reader's review of World War Tilting the Balance, written by Harry Turtledove in 1995. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you guys next time.